All right. We're back. Thanks for riding with us this morning. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. I'm your host here. You can find all kinds of information out about us by joining our website or going to visit it. You can join us on Facebook. You can join us on Patriot Facebook. That's patriotfb.com. It's a brand new variant of Facebook out there. It's just like Facebook, but a little bit more secure and Patriots only. So you won't be censored and you won't have all that. And you can catch America's Voice Now streaming live there every morning as well. So if you're interested, I would encourage you to go to Patriot FB, Foxtrot Bravo, patriotfb.com. You can sign up there and start learning about what's going on in the area. You're surrounded there by patriots. It's a brand new site, so there's not millions of people on there like there are on Facebook. But what you will find there is that, one, anything you post up there won't be censored, unlike Facebook, which notoriously rips stuff. I mean, I post all kinds of stories up on Facebook, but I got to tell you, it's amazing to me how many of them disappear. It truly is. I post comments up there on our representatives' Facebook pages, and I get banned. Why? For public dissent? Since when does our Congress censor the constituents in their own district? What the heck is going on with that? Jason Smith. All right. He knows who he is. There is an article out this morning, and I've told you about this general before. His name is General Vallely. He's got an article out there on WorldNet Daily today, and he's got his own website out there called Stand Up America. I strongly encourage you to visit it at some point, standupamerica.org. He is a strong proponent of the fact that we're running out of time, and it's time to take some level of action. It's. I guess the simplest way to put this is, nobody wants to see a revolution. Impeachment isn't really a solution because, first of all, Obama has, for all intents and purposes, loaded up all of these administrative agencies and all of these court systems and all of everything with these liberal activists. Even if we got him out of office, we'd be stuck with Joe Biden, and we'd still have, according to this article, Valerie Jarrett. And God only knows, if you don't know who Valerie Jarrett is, man, go read up about that woman. She is like, the uber... She is the uber Black Widow. So the tone of this article is, what is the nation to do to save itself from tyrannical centralized rule? He's promoting something called a vote of no confidence, which, quite frankly, I don't see. There's no constitutional authority for it. And, I don't know how you would pull that off. I mean, you'd have to get, and the election commissions would get involved and say, well, you can't really have this thing called a vote of no confidence because there's no authority to do that. His quote is, clearly, America has lost confidence and no longer trusts those in power at a most critical time in our history. It is true that not all who ply the halls of power fit under that broad brush, but most of them are guilty of many egregious acts. And we say it is time to hold a vote of no confidence. It is time for a recall. The problem is that constitutionally we don't have a recall provision. He does say that credibility of our current leadership is gone. And, now we listen to their excuses, their finger-pointing and lies, and all of it is chicanery. There's no legal authority for a vote of no confidence. But he argues that it will take back the power of discourse. I disagree. I think, frankly, and I love Vallely, and I love what he does, but I don't think this is going to work. I do think the article I've written, which is up on America's Voice now, it's called shucks, I forgot it myself. I just had a brain freeze. Place all state and federal capitals under civil disobedience siege. Hey, listen, you want to stop the beast, you stop feeding it, folks. The plan to take back America. Place all state and federal capitals under civil disobedience siege. I mean, stop all commerce. Shut it down. The whole doggone shooting match. Everybody has to be prepared for that. I won't deny that. But if you're not preparing for the inevitable financial or fiscal or military or law enforcement or whatever other collapse is coming down the pike, you either just woke up yesterday or you are the ultimate uber procrastinator. Wow. Now, he does list here in this article is listed, and by the way, the article is not written by him. It's written by Bob Unruh from WorldNet Daily. But he does list a group of things in here, and this is Vallely's list of a sampling of Obama's broken promises and lies. And he's crediting Peter Wehner at Commentary Magazine. His promise not to hold lobbyists, or I'm sorry, I apologize. His promise not to allow lobbyists to work in his administration. Obviously, that's a lie. I mean, the administration is loaded with lobbyists. By the way, it's also loaded with ex-journalists. And you wonder why they won't tell you the truth. I'm going to tell you why they won't tell you the truth. Because half of them are pining for a cake job in the White House or some administrative agency somewhere. His commitment to slash earmarks, he didn't. You remember the commitment that I'm going to go through the budget line by line and we're going to get rid of all of this? Well, if anything else, this is a guy who's added $8 trillion to the budget or to our national debt single-handedly. I mean, for the record, the whole thing was only $10 trillion when he came on board. You know, I watched an interesting interview the other day, or I was watching Hannity the other night, or I caught a snippet of it, and I saw Reagan on an interview with Johnny Carson before he even ran for president now. And it was very interesting. It was 1974, I think. And you know what he said the deficit was? It was like $56 billion. $56 billion deficit. Today we have a $1.1 trillion deficit. 56 is not even $100 billion, which is $100 billion is the budget alone of the Department of Education. I mean, to put that number into perspective, you got to realize that in literally, 35 years, 40 years, we've gone from a budget deficit of $54 billion to a budget deficit of well over in excess of $1 trillion. Remember that a trillion is 1,000 billions. To be the most transparent presidency in history. Well, nix on that, because the truth is that yesterday a federal judge ordered Obama to disclose documents he's been trying to keep hidden. A federal judge on Tuesday ordered the disclosure of a government-wide foreign aid directive President Obama signed back in 2010 that he wants to keep hidden from the public. Why? I think it's because it went to Egypt, but that remains to be seen because we haven't actually seen it. The judge calls the scope of the government's argument for presidential communication privilege troubling. I mean, he's hiding this document related to foreign aid that we're paying, and there was a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit brought by the Center for Effective Government, and the judge has concluded that the presidential order is not properly within the bounds of so-called presidential communication privilege. She wrote, quote, "There is no evidence that the directive was intended to be or has been treated as a confidential presidential communication. The Obama administration maintains that the document was intended for those with a need to know." Well, if we're paying for it, don't we have a need to know? But the judge argued, and this is her quote, "The order was distributed far beyond the president's close advisors, and its substance was widely discussed by the president and the media." She also lectured the federal government on the president's, quote, "cavalier attitude" when it comes to public oversight and transparency. Quote, this is the judge now, the government appears to adopt the cavalier attitude that the president should be permitted to convey orders throughout the executive branch without public oversight, to engage in what is in effect governance by secret law. The truth is, we are operating on a secret shadow government in the first place, ladies and gentlemen. But this president is over the top with the secret stuff. I mean, this guy is so far outside of the bounds of reality with the secret. I mean, you know, you remember a cartoon character from when you were a kid called Secret Squirrel? Everything Obama does is like a secret squirrel operation. The list here goes on from General Vallely. To put an end to phony accounting. Yeah, right. Phony accounting. How did we end up $8 trillion in the hole with this guy? In 5 years, no less, right? To restore trust in government. Oh, my goodness. Well, after the Obamacare debacle, and let me tell you, folks, that's just the latest in a long line of treasons, Americans are coming awake at a stunning and staggering rate. Look, the truth be known, patriots and constitutional conservatives should be thankful that Obamacare actually is bungled as bad as it has been, because if it's done one thing for us, it has awakened literally tens of millions, maybe 100 million Americans to the plight of where we are. And as they come awaken, they have to acknowledge that because it finally hits them in their pocketbook, they're starting to recognize that there are other puzzle pieces that are obviously part of the picture here. His pledge to seek public financing in the general election. He didn't do that. His to treat super PACs as a threat to democracy. Super PACs are what he embraced. The guy is a super PAC. His pledge to keep unemployment from rising above 8%. Well, that's a laugh. We were above 8% when he came on board. We were above 8% when Bush was in place because they gamed the numbers, folks. Let's be candid here. He's not guilty of this individually or solely. He is responsible for doing it on top of everybody else who's ever done it. The truth of the matter is, listen, the unemployment in this country is really closer to about 17 to 20%. And that's no lie. That's the unmitigated truth. To create 5 million new energy jobs. Yeah, right. We spent how many millions of dollars per job under the shovel-ready crap? To identify all those shovel-ready jobs. He later chuckled that his much-hyped shovel-ready projects were not quite as shovel-ready as we expected. Yeah, right. To lift 2 million Americans from poverty. Well, with all due respect, we are on record levels for food stamps, poverty, and disability. I mean, we're above the levels that, percentage-wise, of what was going on in the Great Depression, folks. His promise to bring down health care premiums by $2,500 for the typical family, when in fact we now know that, for the record, it's not only going to cost us more than we've lost the $2,500 potential Benny that we were supposed to get out of there, but it's going to cost most Americans maybe $2,500 more. So it's actually a $5,000 swing. And then if you take into account and you incorporate the average income loss that the average American family has lost, which is another $2,600, do the math, folks. You know, the average family makes the average income in the United States is less than $50,000. It's $47,000. Take $10,000 away from that, and what have you got? His pledge to stop the rise of the oceans. The only ocean that's risen, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, is the rise in the sea of dirty money laundered by your Congress, your president, and your court systems. They're laundering your money. It's all dirty, and they're no different than some cartel guy sitting in a Castle Villa in Medellin. This is a cartel. And make no mistake about it. These guys are laundering your money, and they're siphoning it. How do you think that the average person in Washington right now, every resident makes an average of $75,000, versus the average income in the United States is $47,000? I don't think I even need to go through the whole list. Here's the problem. We have a president who's operating in lawlessness. In fact, Krauthammer, who's a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, so everything he says you got to take with a grain of salt. I like him, but you got to listen carefully to what he says between the lines. And he's the guy, he's willing to throw Snowden under the bus. I heard him in an interview the other day. And let me just finish my point. He came out the other day and said what's going on right now with the Obamacare thing and the way he's manipulating these rules and regulations unilaterally without congressional oversight is like a banana republic, right, of lawlessness. And he's right. But the other day when he was talking about Snowden, he said that Snowden had no right to do that, that he should have come forth to Congress and, well, that's a bunch of malarkey. The truth of the matter is, you see, Snowden did what every American should be doing. He acted on his own personal Declaration of Independence. He determined that the information he had was so dangerous to the Republic that he couldn't risk giving it to people in Congress who would quash it, who would silence it, who would keep it hidden. And he simply made the determination to out it. Now, I've heard all these arguments, oh, he's an inside, controlled opposition and all that. Now, listen, I don't know whether he is or not. And I really don't care. What I do know is that the benefit of what he's done was to bring it all out into the open. Now, listen, maybe the administration finally determined that it was time that the American public got a whiff of the police state that we're living in, so that there wouldn't be a massive uprising overnight when they clamp down. I don't know. I mean, that's a theory that's crossed my mind, and it should have crossed yours. Is their intention so that, they break the news to us slowly by letting us see the NSA thing, and they keep leaking it out to kind of keep it and then now they're passing all of these crazy regulations and rules that are, so abusive of our freedoms and our liberties that it's obvious that, something is amiss. And yet, so they're kind of leaking it, but they, it's really just to keep you indoctrinated and terrified and cowering rather than uprising. Because if they tried to do it all at once, the shock would be too abrupt. It's the old adage of throw the frog in the pot, and if the pot's boiling, the frog leaps right out. But if the pot is at room temperature, this frog will sit in there happily until you boil him, as long as you do it slowly. Now, we're at the end of the road here. So somewhere or other, they've got to step up the pace of letting America know that the water is hot, but not so hot, so quick that we jump out of the pot. I guess that's that argument for Snowden in a nutshell. I don't know. I don't really care. All I know is that it's doing the job of waking up plenty of Americans. It's doing the job of educating people about how far down the road we've fallen. And if enough people listen to alternative media and turn off the sycophants in the Ministry of Propaganda that are nothing more than megaphones for government propaganda, well, we might actually have something here. So the argument here from Vallely is, where do we go? He quoted, by the way, Andrew McCarthy. Andrew C. McCarthy is a commentator who said, absent the political will to remove the president, he will remain president no matter how many high crimes and misdemeanors he stacks up. And absent the removal of the president, the United States will be fundamentally transformed. The truth of the matter is, if you were watching that interview, and I did a segment on this where they were talking in Congress, and Trey Gowdy was interviewing these guys, and he asked, he was asking about the unprecedented level and mentioning that Obama's actions have reached an unprecedented level. We got to do something about it, right? And so his quote was, assume that a statute said you had to provide 2 forms of ID to vote. Can the president require 3 forms? Can he require 1 form? Can he suspend all requirements? If not, why not? If you can turn off certain categories of law, do you not also have the power to turn off all categories of law? Well, with all due respect, if Mr. Gowdy was willing to go look at some of the executive orders, we've already got that in place. He cited Obama's decision to ignore immigration, using as one of the examples. And He also talked about these arbitrary changes to Obamacare and the recess appointments, which are right now in court. And he's already been, look, the courts have already found repeatedly that he's violative of the Constitution, and he's extending his executive power in an unauthorized fashion. So, quite frankly, America, I don't know what more you're waiting for. I mean, the courts barely, at this point, are willing to recognize the level of tyranny that we're under. Half of the judicial system seems to be more than willing to sweep it under the rug. I mean, I guess at this point that when we talk about the checks and balance system between the court system and the legislative and the executive, the checks and balances are gone, folks. I mean, Madison said to us that when all power is vested in Washington and that all the departments are basically protecting each other, you live in tyranny. Hey, kids, hello? Now, there was an article, and there is a case being filed. There's a motion. I shouldn't say a case. There is a resolution running through the House right now, and I strongly encourage you to get a hold of your House member and fight on this. Fight for this. Make sure your representative is co-sponsoring this, which is essentially to take Obama to court for violations and abusing the privileges of the executive office and for refusing to faithfully execute the laws. It's not an impeachment process, and it's not an impeachment procedure. It's a civil action. But at least it will put it on the record that it's happening, number one. And number two, it will give the Congress the tool to say, okay, we're reining you in some way. But I have to be honest with you. I have zero faith that Congress will actually do that. Now, you know who Jonathan Turley is? He's a fairly liberal law professor. And I saw him in an interview the other day, actually, and I talked about it on another show. Turley has represented members of Congress in a lawsuit over the Libyan war. I mean, he's an active, He was talking to a House Judiciary Committee meeting on December 4th. Bob Goodlatte was the guy who was presiding over that thing. And Goodlatte said to him, Professor Turley, the Constitution, the system of separated powers, is not simply about stopping one branch of government from usurping another. It is about protecting the liberty of Americans from the dangers of concentrated government power. How does the president's unilateral modification of acts of Congress affect both the balance of power between the political branches and the liberty interests of the American people? And here's what Turley said. And he's a liberal. The danger is quite severe. The problem with what the president is doing is that he's not simply posing a danger to the constitutional system. He's becoming the very danger the Constitution was designed to avoid. That is the concentration of power. Newtonian orbit, the Newtonian orbit that the three branches exist in is a delicate one, but it is designed to prevent this type of concentration. There are two trends going on which should be of equal concern to all members of Congress. One is that we have had the radical expansion of presidential power under both President Bush and President Obama. We have what many once called an imperial presidency model of largely unchecked authority. And with that trend, we also have the continued rise of this fourth branch. We have agencies that are quite large that issue regulations. And the Supreme Court said recently that agencies could actually define their own and interpret their own jurisdiction. Holy smoke. At that same hearing, Michael Cannon from the Cato Institute said, Abraham Lincoln talked about our right to alter our government or our revolutionary right to overthrow it. This is certainly something no one wants to contemplate. But if the people come to believe that the government is no longer constrained by the law, then they will conclude that neither are they. It is very dangerous for the president to wantonly ignore the law to try to impose obligations on people that the legislature did not approve. America, I submit to you, stand up and prepare to defend yourself. You've been listening to America's Voice Now. Find us on the web at americasvoicenow.org. Facebook.com/America's Voice Now. YouTube.com/America's Voice Now. And patriotfb.com.